Now for our story. Kit Meade had gone into Wakefield this afternoon to do some shopping, leaving the baby, Lisa Fenner's little son, with the new nurse. She'd stopped in at her father's office, but Ben Calvert had been busy at the moment, so she'd gone across to the little cocktail lounge in the Brown Palace Hotel. After she'd been there a few moments, the young man she'd met there before had come in. Had told Kit he was going to follow her advice and break off his engagement. They'd chatted for a while. Then after that, he'd left. Kit discovered to her amazement that she'd been talking to Nicholas Dorn, the young writer who was engaged to marry Peggy Douglas. She'd been a fool, she thought, advising him against the marriage, since that marriage was almost her only hope to hold Bill, her husband, who had always been in love with Peggy. Pleased by this discovery and thinking how ironic it all was, Kit walked out of the lobby of the hotel and returned to her father's office. Now, Ben calls to her from his desk in his inner office.
Ah, Kitt, you're back. Where'd you disappear to? I got rid of that fellow right away and then found out you'd left.
No, I just went across the street and had a drink to kill the time.
I don't like for you to go into places like that alone, Kitt. It isn't dignified. What will people think?
Oh, Dad, let's not go into that what do people think routine. Because, frankly, I don't care at this point.
That's very evident. Hanging around with a lot of barroom loafers. Wouldn't be quite so bad if you had an escort.
Oh, Dad, don't be funny. In my present situation, just how would you suggest I go any place except alone?
Well, I guess you're right. Oh, speaking of that, what's been happening? Have you seen Bill?
Yes, I saw him.
What do you have to say?
Quite a lot of things. None of them very pleasant.
Well, that's to be expected from Bill Meade. What's he up to now?
The same thing. He still wants the divorce. Tried to get me to file for it.
He did? That's just fine. That's what I'd hope. I told you he'd never go ahead and get it by himself.
Yes, but you're wrong. He was just giving me my last chance, he said. Then when I refused, he insisted he was going ahead with it.
He's just talking through his hat. Don't worry about it.
Dad, I can't seem to get it through your head that Bill's changed. He's not the same man we thought we could handle any way we wanted.
I don't believe it. He can't have changed much in just a few months.
You'd be surprised how much he's changed. I haven't told you the payoff.
Well, what is it?
He wants the child.
He wants what?
I said he wants the child. And I confess I wasn't too surprised knowing Bill.
You mean to tell me that crazy, irresponsible, good-for-nothing has the nerve to tell you he wants your child? My grandchild?
It isn't too ridiculous. Remember, he thinks he's... Well, he's its father.
What does he know about bringing up a child? How does he propose to take care of it? Why, the whole idea is preposterous.
Perhaps, but Bill's not kidding about it. He says he's got it all worked out just how he'd manage.
Well, he can just forget it. I wouldn't let him have that child if I had to spend every dime I have to prevent it. He's not a fit father for any child. With his half-baked ideas. His weak-kneed way of doing things. What are you laughing at? He's not going to have that child. What kind of a man would the child become? What's so funny, anyway?
It's just that Bill said practically the same thing about you.
Oh, he did, eh? What did you do? Sit there and let him insult me?
No, I didn't. But I can't help being amused. Because Bill insists that you're the one who isn't fit to bring up a child. In fact, that's what bothers him. He's afraid that between us we'll poison his son's mind.
Oh, you don't say. We'd make a man of him. Teach him to take care of himself. That's more than Bill Meade could teach him.
I agree with you, Dad. But that's not the point.
The point is this. It's not going to happen. I know what it takes to get along in this world. You've got to be tough. And by heaven, I am going to teach that kid to be tough. He's not going to be shoved around by anybody and everybody the way his father's been.
Say, you're really on the warpath.
Well, who wouldn't be? I must say I don't understand your attitude. What on earth's the matter with you?
I'm just feeling lightheaded, I guess. This thing's been up in the air so long it's beginning to lose reality for me.
Well, you better get down to earth, because if Bill's in earnest about this, we've got a fight ahead of us. A very tough fight.
Sometimes I wonder, Dad, just how you expected to defeat Bill. He's got a great many things on his side in this thing, you know.
Oh, has he? Name one.
Well, for one thing, I told him I didn't particularly want the child.
You told him that? Gave him a thing like that to hold over our heads? Kit, you couldn't be such a fool.
I admit it wasn't very bright of me, but I was excited. In a moment of anger, I just blurted it out. Of course, I can always deny having said it.
You bet your life you can. You'll have to. Why, if Bill could prove that one statement, did anyone hear you?
No, Dad. No witnesses.
Well, that's something anyway. Maybe you don't realize, Kitt, how much this means to me. Now that I have a grandson, something I've always wanted, to have to give him up. I couldn't do it. Besides, when I think of the pleasure it would give this town to see me humiliated, when I think how David Bowman would gloat, and Mary Lane, well, it's not going to happen. That's all there is to it.
I hope not, Dad. For your sake.
How about yourself? You can't mean it doesn't matter to you.
Oh, yes, it matters. But it isn't the main thing.
You mustn't talk that way, Kitt. Your own child. It's unnatural. You're his mother. It should mean a great deal to you.
Yes, I suppose it should, but I'm afraid my maternal instincts are somewhat overshadowed at the moment.
Kitt.
Yes?
Kitt, I've been thinking, would it be so bad if you did get the divorce?
What's that? First you shouted your head off. I mustn't get the divorce under any circumstances. And now...
I know. But, well, we have to choose the lesser of two evils. If Bill's determined to have a divorce, well, maybe you'd better give in on that point. Go ahead and get it yourself. It wouldn't be so bad in a way, so long as you were the one who filed for it.
In other words, Dad, you are quite willing to throw me to the wolves in order to be sure you can keep your grandson. Is that it?
It's not a matter of throwing you to the wolves. Why do women always have to exaggerate things?
I'm not exaggerating. The people in this town are nothing but a pack of wolves, and you want to expose me
Good
to...
heavens, Kitt. If Bill's bound and determined to be separated anyway... But we don't have to let him get us mixed up in a custody suit. Suppose we lost. Then we would be stuck. We'd never hear the end of it in this town. How the court decided the Calverts weren't responsible enough to bring up a child. Everybody laughing up their sleeves.
Bill didn't say he'd fight for custody.
Maybe not. But that's the only way he could get hold of the child legally. Of course, 9 chances to 10 are that he wouldn't stand a chance, I'll admit. It has to be a pretty drastic situation when the court awards the custody to the father instead of the mother. But I just don't like taking a chance. You never know. Those lawyers will do anything. Dig up any dirt they can use.
Yes. Yes, you're right.
Don't you think it would be better if the thing never came to trial?
Well, I don't like the idea of being under investigation.
Of course you don't. Of course you know perfectly well you have nothing to fear. Your record's clear.
Yes, but...
But what?
Well, no crime is perfect, and...
You've done nothing? You've broken no laws?
Well, you never know. I just might have done some perfectly innocent thing they could use against me.
Kitt, you're not keeping something from me, are you?
Oh, no, of course not, Dad.
You don't sound very sure of yourself. Now, look here. If there's something I ought to know, something that pertains to this affair, you'd better be sure to tell me. Otherwise, we might wind up losing everything.
Oh, Dad, for heaven's sake, I told you I'm not keeping anything from you. Isn't that enough? Do I have to swear to it?
No, it's just that... Well, I don't think you realize, Kitt, how serious the situation is.
I do realize it, Dad. But you make it all sound so menacing. I'm beginning to feel jumpy.
Maybe it's just as well you do. Then you'll try to help me think of a way out.
Don't worry about that, Dad. I'd give anything to think of a way out myself. The more I think about it, the more I'm sure that I don't want to go through a custody suit in court.
Yes, because if you do have to go to court, Kitt, if Bill's attorney is any good at all, he may stumble on some clue that would lead to Paul Cromwell and to Lisa Fenner. If that happened, and if it were revealed that the baby wasn't really your own, your father's fears as to the ridicule of the townspeople would be more than justified. If only your father could think of a way out. Now for our story. Kitt Meade felt weary and depressed. She'd had quite a shock today, just before she left the cocktail lounge in the Brown Palace Hotel. The charming, rather moody young man she'd met there several days before had come in again. Had told Kitt he'd decided to follow the advice she'd given him during their first casual conversation.
when she'd suggested that it was foolish to marry someone who didn't love you, in the hope that he or she might later change. After he'd left, the bartender had mentioned his name. It was Nicholas Dorn. In a flash, Kitt had realized he'd been talking about Peggy Douglas. It was Peggy he decided it would be unwise to marry. Peggy, who Kitt had been so anxious to see safely married to the young writer. Kitt felt stunned as she went across to her father's office, and their conversation had only increased her feeling of dread and insecurity. So it was a very miserable young woman in a nervous, irritable mood who walked up the stairs of her father's house on 11th Street to be confronted by Jessie Calvert, her father's new wife.
Well, here you are, Kitt.
Yes, Jessie, I'm here. What about it?
Oh, nothing particular. It's just that the nurse, Miss What's-Her-Name, was looking for you a little while ago. I didn't know you'd gone out.
Forgive me, Jessie, for daring to leave the house without your permission.
For heavens, you're in a charming mood.
Well, there's nothing in the world quite so irritating as to walk into your own home and have someone confront you as if you've committed a crime by leaving.
Oh, my goodness, Kitt, don't be childish.
I'm not being.
Well, all right, all right. Why don't you go upstairs and lie down, Kitt? You look like...
Never mind what I look like. What did Miss Thorndyke want? Anything wrong with the baby?
Well, she didn't say. Perhaps some little thing she wasn't sure about.
Well, I hope to heaven she isn't one of these people who's never sure. Never wants to take the responsibility for things. That's what I want her for.
Oh, I don't think she is. Seems very competent, and she seems very pleasant, too. We had a little chat. She's from California.
That's exciting news.
Oh, by the way, speaking of California, you have a letter. I have it right here.
What is my letter doing in your pocket?
Well, I was taking it up to your room. I was sure you'd want to see it right away, since it was from Paul Cromwell.
Paul Cromwell?
Well, I think so.
You seem to have given my letter a great deal of attention. It's odd that you say it's from Paul, since his name isn't on the envelope.
No, but I happen to have a wonderful memory for handwriting. I recognized Paul's right away. He seems to have become quite a traveler.
What makes you say that?
Well, his letter's postmarked New Mexico. Before that, he was in California.
Who told you Paul was in California?
Why, I don't know. I suppose you must have mentioned it.
That's impossible. I couldn't have said such a thing because so far as I know, Paul's been in New York for months.
Really? Well, isn't it strange? I was under the impression he'd been living in Los Angeles or Hollywood or someplace around there.
Yes. Very strange.
Well, don't mind me, Kitt. Go right ahead and read it. I'm sure you're dying to.
Look, Jessie, what are you trying to build up?
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not building anything up.
Oh, yes, you are. All these insinuations about Paul.
Oh, nonsense. You're just in a vile humor and looking for an excuse to take it out on somebody. Well, I don't see what you're getting so excited about. Frankly, you seem to act like a person with a guilty conscience.
You would say something like that. It's the way your mind works. You expect everyone else to be as sly and devious and as dishonest as you are yourself.
Well, Kitt, I don't pretend to be a plaster saint, but one thing I'm sure of, I have at least a decent disposition. If I were you, I'd take a sedative and go to sleep for an hour or so. You might wake up in a better mood.
Now, what made her say that? About Paul's having been in California? How could she know? I'm positive I didn't let anything slip. But then, where would she get the idea? She knew Paul was in New York before. If Jessie knows that Paul was in California while I was, if she stumbled on that, I'm really in a fix. She wouldn't stop at anything if she had me in a spot like that. Well, wonder what Paul wants. I asked him not to write unless he... Kitt, dear, as you requested in your first letter some time ago, I haven't written you before. It's a lucky thing I did tell him that, the way Jessie's mind works. Please forgive me if this letter is somewhat on the dull side. Frankly, I'm not in a very sprightly mood of late. Since you went away, the days have been interminable. I've thought of you constantly, my darling. Oh, Lord. Paul can be the most sentimental... If you ever doubted the constancy of my devotion, these last weeks would prove forever how important you are to me. I've been at my wit's end to keep Lisa from going to pieces. Oh, I can just see Lisa. Those big, sad eyes of hers staring mournfully. Poor Paul. I don't envy him. You've no idea how trying it's been. Only the thought of our future has pulled me through. Our future. I do hope we can get this whole matter straightened up soon. As you see from the postmark, Lisa and I are finally on our way east. We stopped off here in Santa Fe for a short while. Lisa's been somewhat under the weather, and I thought the change would do us both good. We'll go on to Chicago from here. And, of course, I'll get in touch with you the minute we arrive. Oh, Lord, Chicago so soon. We're taking a trip up to Taos tomorrow. This Indian country is wonderful. I hope you and I can come here together one day. Meanwhile, my darling, much love from your Paul.
Kitt reread the letter quickly, then crumpled it and threw it into the fireplace. Since her return to Wakefield, Kitt had deliberately pushed into the back of her mind all thoughts of Paul Cromwell and Lisa. But now, Paul's letter had forced her to remember. She saw Lisa's face, heard again Lisa's tearful voice as she said,
I know it doesn't do any good to retrace things, but ever since you had the accident, lost your child, I've been so miserable, guilty. I felt I was responsible.
Well, of course, Lisa, if we hadn't had that argument, it never would have happened.
I know.
And then Kitt remembered another conversation they'd had. In the car, the day Lisa had been taken to the hospital.
I'm glad you're coming along, Kitt. I wanted to talk to you.
Naturally, I'd come, Lisa.
Kitt, do you really want my child?
Yes, Lisa. If I had a child, it would solve the problem of my marriage.
You see, Kitt, I want my baby so much. I've longed for it, dreamt of how it would look. But this way, to be alone, I don't think it would be fair to the child.
I think you're very wise, Lisa. It wouldn't be fair to the child.
But, Kitt, do you want the child? Would you love it?
Of course, Lisa. Of course I would.
I know how you feel about the baby you lost, Kitt. And if mine takes its place, if you really love it, to have to choose between your child and the person you love. To know that if you keep your baby, you'll lose that person. To know that if you keep the child, you can't give it the sort of life it deserves.
But from a logical viewpoint, Lisa, the conclusion is obvious.
Perhaps it should be. But it's such a strange feeling. I'm afraid I can't talk about it anymore now.
No, don't. Not now. But I'm sure we understand each other, Lisa.
You will be good to my baby. You'll be good to him, won't you?
And now in a few days, Lisa and Paul will be in Chicago. If Lisa finds out that there's trouble about the baby, that it won't have the sort of life I promised, the security of a father's love and a mother's, if she hears about the custody suit, if Bill's lawyer stumbles upon the truth that the child isn't mine, oh, it can't happen. Dad will have to think of a way to keep it from going to court somehow. He's got to.
For the first time, Kitt was learning how it felt to be helpless. Knew the terror of feeling hunted. She remembered all the tricks she'd used, the methods by which she'd practically forced Lisa Fenner to relinquish her child. Now it was all coming home to Kitt because she was in danger. Not only of losing the marriage for which she'd been struggling, but of being exposed by her treachery. Now for our story. It was almost 6 o'clock. In his room at the Brown Palace Hotel in Wakefield, Nicholas Dorn, the young writer, anxiously studied his reflection in the mirror, removed an imaginary speck from his lapel, gave an unnecessary tug at his tie, which was already perfectly symmetrical. Nicholas was nervous. He decided to tell Peggy Douglas, Aunt Mary Lane's pretty niece, that it would be better for them not to marry, that he wanted to break the engagement. Nicholas had realized some time ago that he was deeply in love with Peggy. However, he was equally convinced that Peggy herself was in love with Bill Meade, and that was the reason he now believed it would be disastrous for him to go ahead and marry her, much as he longed to. Now he was eager to see Peggy, yet dreading the interview. Very much in love, yet feeling rather foolish for being so, in view of his previous philosophy. At 5 minutes to 6, his phone rang. It was Peggy. She was downstairs in the lobby. A few minutes later, Nicholas emerged from the elevator, went up to greet the young girl.
Hello, Peggy, darling. You're a good girl.
I am? What?
Besides all your others, you and Aunt Mary both have a virtue not very common with women.
Well, I'm glad to know it, whatever it is.
It's promptitude, my dear. Never keep a man waiting, cooling his heels. Charming quality.
Well, thanks, Nick.
Besides that, you're very lovely to look at.
Oh, goodness, you're very gallant today, Mr. Dorn. You're quite delightful to see yourself.
Thank you.
Your smile is very assuring, because you sounded rather disturbed when I talked to you on the phone last night. I was afraid something must be bothering you.
Well, I have got something on my mind I want to tell you.
And I have something to tell you, too.
Peggy, I'd like to make my little speech first, if you don't mind.
Oh, I don't mind. Just that I thought you'd be anxious to know that I had a talk with Bill.
Oh, you did? Well, in that case, Peggy, perhaps you had better go ahead.
I guess you must be surprised the way I've talked about Bill, about not wanting to see him and everything.
No, Peggy, I'm not surprised.
It was Aunt Mary who made me realize it was something I had to do.
I see. Well, was Aunt Mary right? And is everything all straightened out between you and Bill?
Yes, it's all straightened out. But it wasn't easy exactly, especially at first.
So now everything's on the beam again. That's terrific, Peggy. I want so much for you to be happy, to have what you want.
I know you do, Nick. And I am happy. It's so wonderful to know that, well, that I'm not being unfair to Bill anymore. That he understands about how I feel.
Of course, darling.
But the main reason I'm so happy about it is because of you.
Me?
Yes. I know it's been difficult for you, with the way I behaved, being gloomy and depressed so much. I didn't like burdening you with it, but, well, I just couldn't seem to hide my feelings. This way, now that I've told Bill that you and I are getting married, explain to him why that's the best thing to do.
Peggy, wait a minute.
What's the matter?
Well, maybe I'm a bit slow, but you mean you told Bill that you and I are going to be married?
Why, yes. That's what I've been telling you. Oh, don't you think I should have?
Should have? Why, yes. I mean, I suppose so. That is, well, I'm not sure.
Nicholas, what on earth's the matter with you?
Nothing. Nothing,
But you're acting so strange.
Oh, don't pay any attention. You know how it is, the happy bridegroom. I understand men always get a little slap-happy just before a wedding.
Well...
But, Peggy, I interrupted you. What's the rest of the story? There is more, isn't there? How did Bill feel about this announcement you made?
Well, at first he didn't seem to understand.
I can imagine.
But I told him why I knew. I explained to him that it would be impossible for us, for Bill and me, to ever go back. We couldn't ever recapture what we had once. And so we should each go ahead and build new lives for ourselves.
And you convinced him?
I think so.
Poor Bill.
Why do you say that?
I was just thinking he must be feeling pretty low about now.
Well, I don't suppose he's exactly joyful. But, well, that's only natural. Seeing someone you used to care for. I'll admit it was hard on me, too. But even so, I feel lots better than if I hadn't explained things to him.
Confession is good for the soul and so forth.
Yes, I suppose that is it in a way. I mean, it always makes you feel miserable when you know you're in the wrong and just hate to admit it.
Oh, sure.
Aunt Mary made me see that very clearly.
She always makes good sense. Peggy, Did Bill tell you anything about his plans?
Yes, he did, Nick. He said he's going to go ahead and get a divorce. And then he wants custody of his son, too.
Guy's really got his chin way out, hasn't he? You know, I'm sort of ashamed of myself. I've said some pretty ugly things about Meade. I'm beginning to realize that he's okay.
He is, really, Nicholas. You'd like him if you ever got to know him.
Yes, I think I would, Peggy. At least we have certain things in common.
Yes, you have. You're both sensitive, intelligent, and you try to be fair about things. Strong.
Sensitive, for sure. Intelligent, maybe. But Peggy, in regard to one Nicholas Dorn, I'm afraid the strong part is out.
I don't see why you say that. You've always stood by what you believed.
I have so far, maybe. But
Well, then it's not likely that you'll change at this late date.
I'm not so sure.
Nick,
Yeah, Peggy?
are you sure something's not bothering you?
No. No, everything's wonderful.
Nick, I have a feeling you're unhappy. I don't understand it because I thought you'd be so glad to know I'd made everything right between Bill and me. Because it makes a difference about us, too. Remember the day we quarreled after Jessie came into the coffee shop?
Yes, I remember very well.
And you said a man doesn't want his wife looking moony-eyed every time she hears someone mention another guy's name? Or words to that effect?
Did I say that?
I just mean that now you don't have to worry. We know exactly where we stand with each other. There's no more confusion, no loose ends to worry about.
But, Peggy...
So now there's nothing to stand between us at all. We can go ahead, start building our new life with complete understanding. Aren't you glad, Nick?
Look, Peggy,
Yes, Nick?
Peggy, let's go have dinner, huh? Maybe we can drive out to that new place on the way to the lake. We'll celebrate.
All right. That'd be nice, but...
Don't you want to? We'll do anything you like.
No, that's all right, but before we start, wasn't there something you wanted to tell me?
Oh, it wasn't anything important. I've forgotten what it was.
But, Nick, you even called on the phone to be sure I'd be here. Can't you remember? Was it something about the wedding?
The wedding? Why, what makes you say that?
Well, I mean, maybe something about the arrangements.
Oh. No, darling, everything's all set.
And you're sure there isn't something you ought to tell me tonight?
Yes, I'm sure. Nothing to tell you tonight. Tonight, let's eat, drink, and be merry. For tomorrow...
Tomorrow?
Oh, let's not worry about tomorrow. If we don't, maybe it'll take care of itself.
Peggy looked at Nicholas searchingly. She was certain that he was keeping something from her, but she had no idea of the actual truth. That Nicholas had meant to tell her he felt they should call off their engagement. The last minute, he found he couldn't find the words. Now, although he was relieved, he felt guilty, ashamed that he hadn't the nerve to say what he knew he should. He was only postponing something he still must face.